Everyone mocked the obese girl offered for $1, until the most feared mountain man bought her. The dusty livery barn roars with laughter. A trembling girl is shoved forward, her father shouting for bidders. Then boots pound the floor. A scarred giant, known only for violence, drops a silver coin into her father's palm. The room falls silent. But this wasn't a joke. This was the beginning of a battle no one saw coming. Because the girl holds more than shame, she carries a deed to land with a spring the railroad will kill to control. And the man they fear most, he's the only one willing to protect her. As church bells toll and rifles load, betrayal strikes from the shadows. Cabins burn. Bonds are tested. And a girl once mocked must find the courage to stand tall, even when her own blood rises against her. What happens when the cruelest insult sparks the fight for justice? And can the most feared man on the frontier teach her that she was never worthless at all? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and if this story speaks to you. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Harsh laughter of the crowd rang in Judy May's ears as she stood trembling on the makeshift platform in the livery barn. The smell of hay and horse sweat filled her nostrils, and sawdust coated her worn boots. Her father's grip on her arm was tight enough to bruise as he swayed unsteadily beside her. He bellowed, his words slurred by drink. "That's all I'm asking for, this worthless girl. Ain't good for nothing, but eatin' up provisions." Judy pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to make herself smaller as the crowd of rough men jeered. Miners with coal-stained faces and ranch hands, still dusty from the range, pointed and laughed. Town loafers who spent their days outside the saloon called out cruel jests about her size. "Lord, please," she whispered, her prayer barely a breath. Her mother's silver cross felt cold against her chest, beneath her dress. Mama had always said the Lord had a plan, even in the darkest times. But standing here like cattle at auction, Judy struggled to hold on to that faith. The bidding started as mockery. To bits. Someone called out, "I'll give ya a worn-out saddle blanket." Another shouted to fresh guffaws, "Might need 2 blankets for that one." Judy's cheeks burned with shame. She kept her eyes fixed on the barn's dirt floor, watching it blur through her tears. The crowd's taunts grew louder until suddenly silence fell like a heavy curtain. The shuffle of boots and murmured whispers drew her gaze upward. The crowd was partying, making way for a broad-shouldered figure everyone in town knew to fear. Dale Bear Harlan moved through the space like a shadow, his scarred face stern beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Tales of his violent past had grown into legend around these parts, though he rarely came to town anymore, preferring his solitary cabin up in the mountains. Now he stood before the platform, and even Judy's father's drunken swagger faltered. Bear's presence seemed to fill the barn, making it smaller, darker. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, moved from Judy to her father and back again. Without a word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a silver dollar. The coin caught the lantern light as he held it up, then dropped it into her father's palm. The metal made a sharp ping against the floor when her father fumbled it, then scrambled to retrieve it. "She's yours then," her father muttered, shoving Judy toward the edge of the platform. She stumbled, expecting to fall, but Bear's strong hands caught her arms, steadying her with surprising gentleness. The crowd found its voice again, this time directing their mockery at both of them. "Bear's got himself a wife." Someone shouted, "Guess even a monster needs company." Bear ignored them all, guiding Judy toward the barn doors. The cold evening air hit her face as they stepped outside, making her shiver. Without a word, Bear shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth of the wool and the faint scent of pine needles wrapped around her like a shield. They walked in silence through the darkening streets. A few townspeople hurried to the other side of the road when they passed, while others watched from windows with undisguised curiosity. Judy kept her head down, though the coat's collar helped hide her burning cheeks. As they reached the edge of town, the sweet sound of the church bell rang out across the evening air. 6 tolls for evening service. They paused near the small clapboard building, its windows glowing with lamplight. Judy could hear the congregation starting to sing inside, the same hymns she used to sing with her mama before she passed. Bear shifted beside her, and she dared to glance up at his face. The scars that twisted one side of his mouth didn't hide the unexpected gentleness in his expression, as he tilted his head toward the church door. His eyes met hers with a questioning look, offering her the choice through her tears. Judy noticed for the first time that his eyes were the same warm brown as her mama's had been. She clutched his coat tighter around her shoulders, her heart aching with fear and hope all tangled together. The church bell's echo hung in the crisp air between them as Bear waited patiently for her answer, offering her perhaps the first real choice she'd had in years. Inside the church, the wooden pews creaked as Judy sank into a seat near the back. The familiar scent of beeswax candles and old hymnals wrapped around her. But she kept her eyes fixed on her lap, dreading the stares she knew would come. Dale settled beside her like a protective shadow, his broad shoulders taking up most of the space in the narrow pew. Pastor Whitcomb stood at his weathered pulpit, his kind face illuminated by lamplight, as his voice filled the small sanctuary. In the eyes of our Lord, he declared, his words clear and steady, every soul carries equal dignity. We are all his children, worthy of respect and kindness. Judy's hands trembled slightly as she fingered the worn pages of her hymnal. She could hear the rustle of cloth and quiet whispers as people turned to look at her and Dale, but whenever someone stared too long, Dale would shift slightly in his seat, and the curious eyes would quickly turn away. The service continued with familiar rhythms, prayers, hymns, and scripture readings that reminded Judy of sitting beside her mama in this very church. Not so many years ago, Dale sat silent but attentive through it all, his presence steady as a mountain at her side. As the congregation filed out after the final blessing, the whispers grew louder. Ladies in their Sunday best huddled together, casting furtive glances their way. Men stood in small groups, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disapproval. Miss May, Pastor Whitcomb's gentle voice cut through the murmurs. Might I have a word? He led Judy and Dale to his small office behind the sanctuary. Books lined the shelves, and papers were scattered across his desk. The pastor rummaged through a drawer before pulling out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Your mother left this in my care, he said softly, holding the envelope with careful hands. She made me promise to give it to you when you turned 16. He paused, his eyes kind but serious. She wanted to make sure you'd have something of your own. No matter what happened, Judy's hand shook as she took the envelope. Inside were official-looking papers, the ink slightly faded but still clear. Her eyes widened as she read 40 acres of meadowland on the town's outskirts, and most precious of all, a spring that never ran dry, even in the worst droughts. It's mine, she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Dale stood by the door, his expression unreadable. But he gave a slight nod as if he'd been expecting complications all along. Your mother was a wise woman, Pastor Whitcomb said. She knew land with water would give you independence. His face grew serious. But you should know that spring has caught the railroad's eye. They've been buying up every water source they can find along their planned route. A commotion outside the office drew their attention. Judy's father's voice carried through the door, slurred with drink and anger. Where is she? That deed should have come to me. He was specifically excluded from the inheritance, Pastor Whitcomb said quietly. Your mother made sure of that. They heard heavy footsteps stagger away, followed by the slam of the church door. Through the office window, they watched Judy's father lurch toward the saloon, cursing loudly enough to make several ladies hurry across the street. Evening was settling over the town as Dale and Judy left the church. Pastor Whitcomb's warning about the railroad echoed in Judy's mind as she clutched the deed papers close. The sun had set, leaving the streets in purple shadow, and a chill wind made her pull Dale's coat tighter around her shoulders. They approached the town's only boarding house, its windows glowing with warm lamplight. But before they reached the steps, the door flew open. The keeper, Mrs. Tate, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. We don't take your kind here, she announced, her thin lips pressed into a tight line. Her gaze flicked between Judy and Dale with equal disdain. Dale's expression didn't change, but Judy felt him tense beside her. After a moment, he spoke, his voice low and quiet. Got a shack up in the hills. He glanced down at Judy. It ain't much, but it's dry and warm. We can ride at first light. Judy clutched the deed papers tighter, feeling the weight of the day's events pressing down on her. From the shame of the auction block to the unexpected inheritance, from her father's rage to this final rejection, it was almost too much to bear. But as she looked up at Dale's steady presence beside her, she found herself nodding. Whatever tomorrow might bring, at least she wasn't facing it alone. Morning came with a bitter chill, that painted every surface in crystalline white. Frost glittered on the hitching posts outside the general store, where Dale stood with 2 horses, his own sturdy bay, and a gentle, dappled mare. His breath clouded in the crisp air as he adjusted the saddles one final time. Judy approached slowly, the deed papers tucked safely inside her shawl. The mare waited patiently, but Judy hesitated, her cheeks flushing with shame as she eyed the stirrup. She'd never been good at mounting, her size making it difficult to swing up gracefully. But before her embarrassment could take root, Dale was there, his weathered hands steady and strong. "Plant your foot here," he said quietly, cupping his hands to make a step. No judgment colored his voice, just simple instruction. With his help, Judy settled into the saddle, gripping the reins as Dale had shown her. They rode out as the sun crept above the horizon, leaving behind the sharp smell of coal smoke from the miner settlement. A few early risers lounged outside the saloon, calling out crude remarks that made Judy's shoulders hunch. Dale didn't react, but positioned his horse between Judy and their jeers until the sounds faded into distance. The well-worn road gradually narrowed, leading them into dense pine forest. Shadows dappled the path beneath the towering trees, and the air grew crisp with the scent of pine needles. Around mid-morning, Dale reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Dried venison," he explained, offering her a piece. "Good for the trail." Judy accepted the tough, salty meat with a quiet thank you as they rode. She began humming softly old hymns her mother had taught her, the familiar melodies helping to calm her nerves. Dale seemed content with the gentle sound, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings as they traveled. When the sun hung high overhead, they stopped beside a creek that cut through a small clearing. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones, and Dale took the opportunity to show Judy how to properly fill a canteen. "Cup your hand like this," he demonstrated. "Lets you check for things you don't want to drink." His large hands moved with surprising gentleness as he guided her through the motion. "Always fill upstream from where the horses drink." The afternoon passed in quiet travel until, as evening approached, they crested a rise to find Dale's line shack nestled against a hillside. The rough-hewn log cabin looked like it had grown straight from the forest floor, with moss creeping across its shake roof and a stone chimney rising from one end. It wasn't much to look at, but something about its sturdy simplicity spoke of shelter and safety. "Need wood for the night," Dale said as they dismounted. He showed Judy where he kept the axe, and which fallen branches were best for burning. Her first attempts at gathering were clumsy, dropping pieces, struggling with the larger logs, but Dale never commented, simply working alongside her until they had a decent pile. Inside the cabin was spare but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and simple furniture, a table, 2 chairs, and some storage trunks filled the single room. Dale set about preparing a stew with dried meat and some root vegetables, while Judy arranged their gathered wood near the hearth as they sat eating from tin bowls. The question that had been burning in Judy's mind finally found voice. "Why?" she started, then gathered her courage. "Why did you buy me?" Dale was quiet for a long moment, stirring his stew. When he finally spoke, his words were simple, but carried the weight of truth. "Because you deserved better." The howl of wolves echoed from the darkness beyond the cabin walls, making Judy shiver despite the warmth of the fire. Dale rose without comment and positioned his rifle near the door, checking that it was loaded before returning to his meal when it came time to sleep. Dale arranged some blankets in opposite corners of the cabin. They settled down like careful strangers, bound together by circumstance rather than choice. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the log walls, while outside, the wolves called to each other across the vast wilderness. Judy lay awake for a while, listening to Dale's steady breathing from his corner. Everything had changed so quickly: the auction, the inheritance, this escape to the hills. She clutched her mother's deed close beneath her blanket, uncertain of what tomorrow might bring, but knowing, for the first time in years, that she was truly safe. Dawn brought a gentle snowfall, soft flakes drifting through the pine branches to dust the clearing in white. Dale stood at the chopping block, demonstrating the proper stance to Judy as she watched intently, her breath visible in the cold morning air. "Keep your feet apart." "Like so," Dale instructed, positioning the axe. "Let the weight of the blade do the work." He brought the axe down in one smooth motion. Splitting a log cleanly, Judy gripped the spare axe with uncertain hands, its weight unfamiliar. Her first few swings went wide, barely grazing the wood. Dale adjusted her grip patiently, showing her how to line up the blade. "That's it," he encouraged, as she finally split a small piece. "Ain't about strength, it's about finding the right spot," though her arms trembled with effort and her back protested. Judy kept at it until she had a modest pile of split wood. Dale nodded approvingly at her work, and that simple gesture warmed her more than any fire could. Later that morning, Dale brought out his old single-action rifle. The weapon's worn wooden stock spoke of years of use, but it had been well maintained. He set up an empty tin can on a fallen log 20 paces away. "First rule," Dale said firmly, "always treat it like it's loaded." He showed her how to check the chamber, how to hold the rifle against her shoulder, breathe slow and steady. Squeeze the trigger, gentle-like, don't pull. Judy's first shot went wide, making her flinch. But Dale stood beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. "Take your time. Line up the sights like I showed you." On her third try, the can jumped and clattered with a satisfying ping. A small victory, but Dale's quiet good made her stand a little straighter. When the sun reached its peak, Dale prepared to check his "Won't be gone more than a few hours," he said, pulling on his heavy coat. "Keep the door latched." Alone in the cabin, Judy set about cooking beans in the cast-iron pot hanging over the fire. She hummed one of her mother's favorite hymns, Amazing Grace, as she worked. The familiar melody helped ease her solitude. The crunch of footsteps in snow made her freeze mid. A shadow fell across the threshold, and Judy's heart jumped when she saw a native woman standing there, a basket of dried herbs in her arms. "Do not be afraid," the woman said softly, remaining still in the doorway. Her dark eyes were kind, her manner gentle. "I am Nayland. I trade with Bear." With Dale from time to time, Judy's hands trembled, but something in Nayland's calm demeanor helped her find her voice. Would you like to come in from the cold?" Nayland stepped inside, setting her basket on the table. She moved with quiet grace, explaining how different herbs could be used for medicine and cooking. Judy found herself relaxing as they talked, Nayland's presence bringing an unexpected sense of peace to the cabin. The door opened again later, bringing a rush of cold air as Dale returned. He nodded respectfully to Nayland, unsurprised by her presence. "Good hunting?" she asked him. "Fair enough," Dale replied, hanging up his coat. Brought back to rabbits, they gathered around the fire as evening drew in, sharing bowls of beans and rabbit stew. Nayland spoke of her life, her voice growing soft as she mentioned her husband. "He was killed in a skirmish 3 summers ago," she said, studying the flames. "After that, some people, both my tribe and settlers, they looked at me differently. Words can cut deeper than knives sometimes. Judy felt tears prick her eyes, recognizing her own pain in Nayland's story. Without thinking, she reached out and touched the older woman's hand. Nayland's fingers curled around hers, warm and comforting. As night settled in, Dale worked quietly in one corner, mending a broken chair with careful movements. Judy, feeling braver in the presence of her new friend, began to sing softly. The hymn rose clear and sweet in the cabin's close air. "This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings. And round me rings the music of the spheres." Her voice grew stronger with each verse, filling the small space with warmth and hope. When she finished, she noticed Dale had stopped his work. In the firelight, the corner of his mouth had turned up slightly, not quite a full smile, but something close to it. The expression softened his scarred face, making him look younger somehow. Nayland hummed the melody back to her. "You have a gift," she said. "Songs can heal hearts, if we let them." The 3 of them sat together in comfortable silence after that, while the snow continued to fall outside and the fire crackled softly in the hearth. Though they made an unlikely group, the Apache widow, the mountain man, and the girl no one had wanted, something new was taking root in that moment, like a tender shoot breaking through winter soil. The winter sun had barely cleared the treetops when Dale announced they would ride to see Judy's inheritance. He helped her saddle the bay mare, showing her how to check the cinch was tight. "It's a fair piece east," Dale explained, mounting his own horse. "Best we get moving before the day gets away from us." They rode single file along a narrow trail between snow-dusted pines. The wind cut sharp through Judy's shawl, making her grateful for the heavy coat Dale had insisted she wear. Her thighs ached from yesterday's ride, but she held her tongue, determined not to complain. Hours passed as they climbed over rocky ridges and crossed small streams. Dale kept a steady pace, occasionally glancing back to ensure she followed safely. Near midday, they crested a hill, and he reined his horse to a stop. "There," he said, pointing to a green meadow below. "That's your mother's land." Judy's breath caught at the sight. The meadow spread out like a blanket between stands of aspen and pine. Even in winter, patches of grass showed through the snow. But what drew her eye was the spring, a pool of crystal-clear water bubbling up from the earth, spilling into a stream that wound through the valley. They picked their way down the slope and dismounted near the spring. Judy's legs trembled as she walked to the water's edge. Kneeling in the snow, she watched the water dance over smooth stones. "Mama used to sing about this place," she whispered, touching the cold water. Clear as heaven's tears, she'd say her own tears fell, making ripples in the spring. Dale moved methodically around the meadow's edge, his experienced eyes scanning the ground. He stopped at several points, frowning at wooden stakes driven into the frozen earth. "Railroad's been here?" he said grimly. "These are survey markers. Fresh ones." They shared a simple meal of bread and jerky, sitting on a fallen log near the spring. Judy was about to ask Dale more about the survey stakes when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. A rider appeared from the tree line. Well-dressed man on an expensive-looking horse. He carried himself with an air of authority that made Judy shrink slightly. "This here's private property," Dale called out, his hands sliding casually toward his rifle. The rider pulled up short, looking down at them with obvious disdain. "Harlan Briggs, Northern Pacific Railroad," he announced curtly. "And you're mistaken. This land will soon belong to the company. We need this water source for our steam engines. The deed's proper and legal." Dale replied, his voice steady but cold. "This land belongs to Miss May," Briggs sneered, his gaze dismissing Judy entirely. "That worthless piece of paper won't stand against company lawyers. We're putting a station here, whether you like it or not." Dale stood slowly, his rifle now in plain view. "Best ride on, Briggs, while you can." The foreman's face darkened, but he wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over," he spat. "The railroad always gets what it wants." He spurred his mount and rode away, leaving threats hanging in the cold air. Judy's hands were shaking, but not entirely from fear. Something else burned in her chest, fierce desire to protect what was hers, what her mother had left her. "He can't really take it, can he?" she asked Dale. "Not if we stand firm," Dale replied, though his expression remained troubled as they mounted up for the ride home. The sun was setting by the time they reached the cabin, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. While Dale tended to the horses, Judy went straight to work in the kitchen area. She was tired from the long ride, but determination drove her. She had to prove to herself as much as to Dal that she could contribute something worthwhile. She mixed cornmeal with the last of the buttermilk Nayland had brought, adding a pinch of salt. While the cornbread baked in the Dutch oven, she prepared a rabbit stew, seasoning it with herbs from her mother's teachings. The familiar work of cooking settled her nerves, helping her push away thoughts of Briggs and his threats. The cabin filled with warm, homey smells. Dale sat at the rough table, watching with surprise as Judy set out 2 full plates. "Been a long spell since I had proper cornbread," he said, taking a careful bite. His eyes widened slightly. "This is mighty fine cooking, Miss May. Best I've had in years." Judy felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "Mama taught me," she said softly. "She always said good food could make any place feel like home." They ate in comfortable silence as darkness gathered outside. The fire crackled in the hearth, and for all her worries about the railroad, Judy felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of belonging, as if she'd finally found where she was meant to be. Word traveled quickly in small towns. By the second morning after their visit to the spring, a messenger arrived at Dale's cabin with an official summons from the town council. They wanted Judy to present her deed for review. Dale hitched up his wagon early the next morning, laying fresh straw in the bed to ward off the cold. Judy wrapped herself in 2 shawls, her mother's deed pressed close to her heart. The morning air bit sharp as Dale helped her onto the wagon seat beside him. "Remember," he said quietly as they set out, "you got every right to be there." The wagon wheels creaked over the frozen ground. Judy's stomach churned with each mile closer to town. When they reached the outskirts, miners stopped their work to stare. Their whispers followed the wagon down the rutted main street. There goes Bear and his pet, one called, trying to draw laughs from his companions. Dale's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes forward. Judy clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Forcing herself to sit straight, despite wanting to shrink from the attention, they found Nayland waiting for them outside the council hall, her dark eyes warm with greeting. She had dressed formally in her finest blanket, her bearing proud and dignified. "I will speak of the old agreements," she assured Judy. "The spring has always served both peoples." The council hall was already crowded when they entered. 5 stern-faced men sat at a long table while townsfolk packed the wooden benches. Judy felt the weight of every stare as she moved to stand before the council. Her legs trembled, but she forced them still. "Miss May," intoned Samuel Blackwood, the council head, "you claim ownership of the 40 acres containing Clearwater Spring. Present your proof." Judy's hand shook as she unfolded the deed. The paper crackled loudly in the hushed room. "My mother left me this land," she said, her voice smaller than she wished. "It's all legal and proper." A ripple of derisive laughter ran through part of the crowd. "Ain't proper for a girl like that to own nothing," someone called out. But Nayland stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "That spring has watered both settler and Apache stock for generations," she declared. "The Treaty of 1867 specifically protects existing water rights. My people remember these promises even if others forget." The council members shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew Nayland spoke truth about the treaties, even if few liked to admit it. Pastor Whitcomb rose from his seat, holding up his hand for attention. "I can testify to the validity of this deed," he announced clearly. "Sarah May entrusted it to my keeping before her death with explicit instructions for her daughter. Every signature and seal is legitimate." A murmur ran through the crowd. Several farmers and ranchers began nodding. They had their own reasons to resist the railroad's growing power. Someone started clapping, and others joined in. Judy felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected support. The applause died instantly as the doors burst open. Judy's father stumbled in, his face flushed with drink even at this early hour. "This is a farce," he shouted. "The girl ain't competent to manage property. She can't even manage her own size." Cruel laughter mixed with angry mutters. Judy felt the familiar shame rising, but Dale's steady presence at her back helped her stand firm. Blackwood banged his gavel. "This council will deliberate on the matter properly. We'll announce our decision within the week. The railroad won't wait a week." Judy's father spat. "They got lawyers coming?" "Then we'll hear them too," Blackwood replied firmly. "This meeting is adjourned." People began filing out, but several paused to speak quietly to Judy. Old Mrs. Peterson, who ran the mercantile, squeezed her hand. "About time someone stood up to those railroad men," she whispered. 2 ranchers tipped their hats respectfully as they passed. Outside, Dale helped Judy back into the wagon. She was shaken, but not entirely from fear now. Something had shifted today. She had stood her ground, and not everyone had laughed. "You did well," Nayland said, touching Judy's arm gently. "Remember, courage is not about being unafraid. It is about continuing despite fear." Judy nodded, too emotional to speak. As Dale clucked to the horses, she heard scattered calls of encouragement from townsfolk still gathered on the boardwalk. They were fewer than the mockers, but their voices carried just as far. The wagon rattled back toward the cabin, leaving the town's tensions behind. Judy held tight to her deed, and to the memory of those who had stood with her. For the first time, she felt truly worthy of her mother's gift. The wagon wheels crunched over frozen ground as Dale and Judy made their way back to the cabin. Despite the morning's tension, hope flickered in Judy's chest like a candle flame. Some townsfolk had actually stood up for her. The thought warmed her more than her doubled shawls. Inside the cabin, Judy stirred the banked coals and set about making their evening meal. The familiar tasks steadied her hands. When the corn, pone, and beans were ready, she cleared her throat softly. "Would it be all right if I said grace out loud tonight?" Dale nodded, removing his hat. Judy folded her hands, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for shelter, and for those who stand beside us in hard times." "Amen, amen," Dale echoed, his rough voice, gentle dot morning, brought fresh frost and Dale's announcement that the roof needed mending before heavy snow arrived. He showed Judy how to brace the wooden ladder against the eaves. "Steady now," he instructed, testing each rung as he climbed. "Hand me them shingles, one at a time." Judy gripped the ladder firmly, passing up wooden shakes as Dale worked. Her arms trembled from the effort, but she held fast. The familiar scent of cedar filled the air as Dale split fresh shingles with his hatchet. The sun had climbed halfway when Nayland appeared on the trail, leading her pony laden with fresh venison. Her dark eyes crinkled with amusement at finding them on the roof. "I see Bear is teaching you cabin keeping," she called up to Judy. "Good skills to have." Soon, the three of them sat around the table. Sharing tender venison and wild onions, Nayland had gathered. Laughter came easier now, warming the cabin like summer sunshine. Judy found herself smiling more than she had in years. Later, as she swept the rough plank floor, hymns rose naturally to her lips. The old songs her mother had loved filled the small space with melody. Dale paused in cleaning his rifle, cocking his head to listen. "Been a long time since these walls heard singing," he said softly. "Makes it feel like home again." Judy's heart swelled at his words. Home. She'd never really had one. Before, the peaceful moment shattered at dusk when hoofbeats approached. Dale's hand went to his gun belt, but it was only young Tommy from the telegraph office. His cheeks red from writing. "Message for Miss May," he panted. Holding out a folded paper, Dale took it, pressing a coin into the boy's palm. His face darkened as he read the words. "What is it?" Judy asked, her throat tight with fear. "Railroad means to take the spring," Dale said grimly. "Says they'll move in by force within the week if you don't sell." Judy's fingers clutched at her mother's deed, where it lay in her apron pocket. All the courage she'd found that morning seemed to drain away. "We'll be ready," Dale said, his voice hard as iron. "Ain't letting them steal what's rightfully yours." They barely touched their supper that evening. Even Nayland, who had stayed to help plan, ate little. The three sat before the fire afterward, watching flames dance over cedar logs. The quiet between them felt heavy with worry, but also with determination. Judy's hands moved restlessly in her lap, twisting her worn shawl. "My mama knew this spring was important," she said finally. "Important enough to keep it safe for me. I can't let her down." "You won't," Nayland assured her. "You have friends now. Sometimes the smallest spring feeds the mightiest river." Dale nodded, checking the loading of his rifle. His scarred face was stern in the firelight, but his eyes held warmth when he looked at Judy. The fire crackled softly as darkness pressed against the window panes. Their little piece felt fragile as spun glass, but it was real. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Outside, a lone coyote called across the hills. Inside, three people from different worlds sat close. Bound by something stronger than blood, the choice to stand together against injustice. The railroad might have money and lawyers, but they had friendship, courage, and right on their side. 3 tense days crept by like molasses in winter. Each dawn brought fresh frost and fresh worries about what the railroad might do. Dale rose before sunrise, his axe biting into pine logs as he strengthened the fence line. The steady thunk of wood splitting echoed across the hollow, while Judy kept the cabin warm and watched. The trail for trouble. From her perch by the window, Judy could see Dale's broad shoulders swing the axe, the logs falling into neat piles. He worked methodically, pausing only to wipe his brow or scan the ridgeline. The growing woodpile by the cabin door gave her comfort. They'd stay warm whatever came. Nayland visited each afternoon, bringing her wisdom and friendship. She showed Judy how to strip willow bark and steep it properly for headache tea. "Let it brew until the water turns golden," Nayland explained, stirring the pot hanging over the fire. "Too weak won't help. Too strong turns bitter." Her gentle voice made even medicine lessons feel like friendship. On the 4th morning, Judy squared her shoulders and announced she needed to visit her spring. Dale frowned but nodded, shouldering his rifle. "I'll keep watch from the tree line," he said. "You take what time you need." The walk to the spring took nearly an hour. Dale hung back, giving Judy space while staying close enough to protect her. When they reached the clearing, Judy's heart lifted at the sight of clear water bubbling up from the earth. This was her mother's gift, her rightful inheritance. Kneeling beside the spring, Judy touched the cold water. Her reflection wavered in the surface, no longer the scared girl from town, but someone stronger, someone worth defending. "Lord," she prayed softly. "Give me courage to protect what's mine. Help me be worthy of Mama's trust and these good friends you've sent." A pebble clattered down the slope. Dale's low whistle made her look up. 3 railroad men sat their horses on the ridge, watching. Their dark shapes stood stark against the morning sky. Dale's rifle gleamed as he raised it slightly. After a long moment, the men wheeled their horses and rode away. But their message was clear. They were watching, waiting. That evening brought unexpected comfort. As dusk painted the sky purple, voices carried up the trail. Dale tensed until they recognized Martha Webb's wagon leading a small procession from town. 6 women and 4 weather-beaten ranchers climbed down, arms full of supplies. "Thought you could use some neighborly help," Martha said, pressing a sack of flour into Judy's trembling hands. Others brought candles, coffee, salt pork, and ammunition. "Railroad's been pushing folks around too long," old Jake Turner growled, his rancher's face creased with sympathy. "About time somebody stood up to them." Judy's eyes filled with tears at their kindness. These people had once laughed at her, but now they chose to stand beside her. Dale shifted awkwardly, unused to so many visitors, but managed gruff thanks as he helped unload the wagon. After their guests departed, Judy sat at the rough table with her mother's deed spread before her. The lamplight cast warm circles on the paper as she carefully copied every word onto fresh sheets, just in case, she explained to Dale, who watched from his chair by the fire. "If anything happens to the original, nothing will," Dale promised, his voice iron-hard with conviction. "I'll guard it with my life. And you with it, with my life. And you with it." Judy's hand stilled on the paper. She looked at this scarred mountain man who had become her protector, this gentle soul whom others feared. His promise meant everything. "I know you will," she whispered, "and that's why I ain't afraid anymore." Dale nodded, turning back to cleaning his rifle. The lamp flickered, casting their shadows large against the cabin walls. Outside, wind whispered through pine boughs, and somewhere a coyote called, but inside was warm, and for the first time since her mother died, Judy felt truly safe. The original deed lay smooth beneath her fingers as she finished the copy. Her mother's legacy, protected now by friendship, stronger than paper, by love fiercer than law. Whatever the railroad planned, they would face it together. The morning sun painted the snow in blinding white, but its cheerful light couldn't lift the shadow of worry that hung over the cabin. Dale pulled on his heavy coat, checking his rifle and pistol before heading to his horse. "Need supplies?" he said gruffly. Running low on coffee and ammunition both, Judy wrung her hands, not liking the idea of him going alone. "Be careful," she whispered. Nellen touched Judy's shoulder. "I will stay with her," she assured Dale. "We will tend the fire and watch the trail." Dale nodded, swinging into his saddle. The horses' hooves crunched in the snow as they disappeared down the path toward town. Judy and Nayland spent the morning quietly, grinding coffee beans and sorting herbs while keeping watch through the cabin's small windows. As the sun climbed toward noon, Nayland was showing Judy how to weave a basket when they smelled it, smoke, too thick to be from their chimney. They rushed outside, and their hearts stopped. A dark plume rose from the direction of the cabin, staining the winter sky. "No!" Judy gasped. They ran through the trees, Nayland leading the way along the quickest path. When they broke into the clearing, flames were already consuming the cabin. The heat struck their faces as fire devoured the log walls and moss-covered roof. Everything was burning: Dale's books, Judy's shawl, the chair Dale had mended, their food stores, their home. Judy stumbled forward, but Nayland caught her arm, holding her back from the inferno. The crack of branches made them spin around. 3 men emerged from the trees. Judy's father, red-faced and whiskey-stinking, flanked by 2 railroad thugs with dark eyes and darker intentions. "Time to come home, girl," her father growled. Lurching forward, Judy tried to run, but the men were faster. They seized her arms, dragging her toward a waiting wagon. Nayland launched herself at them like a mother bear, clawing and striking. One of the thugs backhanded her, sending her sprawling in the snow. "Let me go!" Judy screamed, fighting with all her strength. "Dale, Dale, help me!" As if summoned by her cry, Dale burst from the trees on horseback, rifle raised. But the second thug was ready. He swung his own rifle like a club, catching Dale across the temple. Dale toppled from the saddle, blood streaming down his face as he hit the ground. No. Judy's shriek echoed off the mountains as the men threw her into the wagon. Her father climbed up front, snapping the reins. The wagon lurched forward, wheels crunching through snow and ice. Judy fought to look back as they rattled away. The last thing she saw was Dale lying motionless in the blood-stained snow, Nayland running to his side, and their burning home collapsing in on itself in a shower of sparks. The sun sank behind the mountains, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of purple and red. Where the cabin had stood, only smoking ruins remained. The snow around it had melted into muddy slush, dotted with chunks of charred wood, and Ashdod knelt beside Dale, who lay on a bed of pine boughs beneath a crude lean-to she had built. She pressed a cloth against the gash on his head, murmuring prayers in her native tongue. Dale's breathing was shallow but steady, his skin pale beneath the blood and soot. "Judy," he whispered, trying to rise. "Have to? Find her." "Be still," Nayland commanded, pushing him back down. "You cannot help her if you die from fever or blood loss." She reached for her medicine pouch, selecting herbs to fight infection and ease pain. Night crept in around them, the temperature plummeting. Nayland built up their small fire, keeping watch while tending to Dale. His strength was returning slowly, too slowly for his liking. Every few minutes he would try to sit up, and every time Nayland would firmly press him back down. "I failed her," Dale rasped, his voice thick with pain and guilt. "Promise to protect her. You have not failed." Nayland said fiercely, "You live, and while you live, there is hope." She lifted her face to the star-filled sky, her voice rising in a prayer chant that echoed off the silent mountains. "Creator of all things, give strength to this warrior's body. Give fire to his spirit. Help him rise again to defend the innocent." Dale's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing weakly but with determination. "I will not fail her again," he whispered. "Whatever it takes, I will find her." The fire crackled, sending sparks floating up toward the cold stars. Behind them, the remains of their home smoldered, but ahead lay a path that would lead them to Judy, a path marked by vengeance, justice, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. The first light of dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold. Dale gritted his teeth, using a pine trunk for support as he forced himself upright. Pain shot through his ribs like fire, making him catch his breath. His head throbbed where the rifle butt had struck. Dried blood still crusted at his temple. Nayland steadied him with a strong hand. "Easy," she cautioned. "The herbs need time to work." "No time," Dale growled. He stumbled toward his horse, which Nayland had recovered and tethered nearby. The animal nickered softly, sensing his pain. Nayland helped him mount, though every movement sent fresh agony through his battered body. Once in the saddle, Dale slumped forward, gripping the horn with white-knuckled fingers until the world stopped spinning. They followed the wagon tracks cutting through the snow, moving at a frustratingly slow pace. The trail led down from the mountains toward town, clear as writing in the fresh powder. Dale's horse plodded carefully, while Nayland rode beside him, watching for signs he might fall. Meanwhile, in town, Judy sat huddled in a corner of the saloon's upstairs room. Dust motes danced in the thin sunlight filtering through grimy windows. Outside her door, she could hear her father's heavy breathing and occasional cough, his guard duty fueled by whiskey and bitterness below. Railroad men's voices drifted up through the floorboards. They laughed and boasted about seizing the spring, their crude jokes mixing with the clink of glasses. Judy pulled her knees to her chest, tears rolling down her cheeks as she whispered the words to Amazing Grace. The hymn's familiar verses gave her strength, even as fear knotted her stomach. Back in the pine forest, Dale's strength finally gave out. He slipped sideways in the saddle, only Nayland's quick action keeping him from falling. They stopped beside a small stream, where she helped him down to rest against a boulder. "I'm too broken," Dale muttered, his voice hoarse with pain and self-doubt. "Can't even stay mounted. How can I fight them?" He touched his scarred face, remembering old wounds and older failures. Nayland knelt before him, her dark eyes fierce. "These scars were given for this moment," she said firmly. "Each mark you bear has prepared you. The girl's hope rests on you, the only one who saw her worth when others mocked." The day faded into dusk, forcing them to make camp among the trees. Nayland built a small fire, shielded from view, and tended Dale's wounds with fresh poultices. The flames cast dancing shadows as Dale stared into their depths. Lost in memory. Sarah. She was 6 when raiders came. His hand crept to his chest, where grief sat like a stone. Couldn't save her or her mother. Nayland listened silently, respecting the weight of his words. Won't lose another, Dale continued, his jaw tightening. Won't let Judy suffer, because I'm weak. Whatever it takes, I'll get her free. They spent the night planning, speaking in low voices. By the dying fire, the spring would be key. The railroad men would want to stake their claim there, making it the likely site of confrontation. They'll expect you to come straight into town, Nayland observed, sketching a rough map in the dirt. But the spring trail offers cover, places to watch and wait. Dale nodded, checking his rifle with hands that grew steadier by the hour. We'll head there at first light. Time to remind them that some things are worth fighting for. The fire crackled low, its embers glowing like stars fallen to earth. Dale leaned back against his saddle, watching the flames. His body ached, but his mind was clear now, focused on the task ahead. In his heart, the image of Judy's gentle smile and quiet strength burned brighter than his pain. As night deepened, owl calls echoed through the trees. Dale touched the crude bandage at his temple, feeling the wound that had nearly stopped him. But Nayland was right. Every scar, every hard lesson had led to this moment. Tomorrow would bring violence, but also justice. Tomorrow, he would keep his promise to protect the daughter of his heart. Nayland took first watch, her figure silhouetted against the starlit sky. Dale closed his eyes, gathering strength for dawn, when they would ride for the spring and whatever fate awaited them there. Morning sunlight spilled across the meadow, turning frost-tipped grass to gold. Dale and Nayland crouched at the tree line, watching the scene unfold before them. Steam rose from the spring in delicate wisps as railroad men bustled around it, unloading wooden fence posts from a wagon with sharp metallic clanks. Judy sat slumped against a wagon wheel, her wrists bound with rough rope. Her father stood nearby, taking swigs from a silver flask and sneering down at her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her chin remained lifted, defiant despite her fear. Dale drew a slow, steadying breath. His ribs screamed in protest as he straightened, but he forced the pain down deep. Nayland touched his arm briefly, a silent gesture of support before melting away into the brush to circle around. Behind the wagon, with deliberate steps, Dale walked into the clearing. The morning quiet shattered as shouts erupted. Men dropped their posts, hands flying to holstered guns. Metal gleamed in the sun as weapons were drawn. "Stop right there, Harlan." Briggs, the railroad foreman, leveled his revolver. But another voice rose above the chaos. Judy's voice, trembling at first but growing stronger. The hymn her mother had taught her poured forth. Blessed be the fountain of life. The pure notes seemed to hang in the crisp air, making even the hardened men pause. Dale seized that moment of hesitation. He lunged forward, crossing the space to the nearest thug in 3 long strides. Before the man could fire, Dale knocked the gun from his grip with a single powerful blow. The clearing erupted into violence. Men shouted and cursed as they charged at Dale. He met them with grim determination. Decades of frontier hardship behind every strike. A rifle but swung at his head. He ducked and drove his shoulder into the attacker's gut. Fists connected with flesh as the brawl intensified. Through the chaos, Dale caught glimpses of Nayland. She reached the wagon while the men were distracted, her knife flashing as she sawed at Judy's bonds. No. Judy's father roared, finally noticing. He raised a gleaming pistol, but Dale was there in an instant. His hand clamped around the drunk man's wrist, forcing the barrel skyward as it discharged with a deafening crack. Judy scrambled to her feet the moment she was free. A fallen fence post lay near her feet. She snatched it up without thinking. When one of her captors lunged toward her, she swung with all her might. The solid thunk of wood-meeting flesh surprised even her. The man stumbled back, cursing. Suddenly, new voices joined the fray. Hoofbeats thundered as riders emerged from the tree line. Townsfolk, led by Pastor Whitcomb on his dappled mare, Nayland had sent word before they left their camp, calling on those who stood against the railroad's greed. The railroad men's courage faltered at the sight of honest witnesses. They backed away, gathering their wounded. Briggs spat on the ground before mounting his horse. "This ain't over," he snarled, but his men were already retreating. Judy's father took one last look at his daughter, something unreadable crossing his face before he staggered after them. The thunder of hooves faded as the attackers fled, leaving churned earth and scattered fence posts in their wake. Pastor Whitcomb dismounted, leather satchel in hand. "I've brought the original survey maps," he announced, "and 3 witnesses to testify that this spring has served both settler and native families for generations." He nodded to the elderly ranchers who had accompanied him. Dale limped to Judy's side, his breathing ragged from exertion. She dropped the fence post and wrapped her arms around him, careful of his injuries. His large hand came to rest protectively on her shoulder. Together they stood beside the spring while Pastor Whitcomb spread his papers on a flat rock. The water bubbled up clear and pure, just as it had when Judy's mother first showed it to her, though the final judgment still lay ahead. For now, at least. The spring remained defended, protected by the unlikely family that had formed around its pristine. Waters. The morning sun climbed higher, transforming lingering frost into diamonds scattered across the meadow. Judy's hymn had faded, but its echo seemed to remain, carried on the gentle ripples of the spring. Lantern light wavered against the wooden walls of the town hall as dusk settled over the valley. The council chamber was packed tight, with townsfolk pressed shoulder to shoulder, their boots creaking on worn floorboards. Coal smoke from the pot-bellied stove mingled with the sharp scent of tobacco and winter-worn wool. Dale stood like a weathered oak behind Judy's chair, his bruised face half hidden in shadow. Every breath made his ribs burn, but he remained steady, a silent guardian. Judy sat with her hands folded in her lap, clutching a handkerchief so tightly her knuckles showed white. Pastor Whitcomb approached the council table, spreading out the deed and survey maps with careful hands. The yellow lamplight caught the official seals as he arranged each document with deliberate precision, his voice carrying to every corner of the crowded room. "I present not only the legal deed to this land and spring, but also 3 witnesses who can testify to its history." 3 elderly ranchers stepped forward, their gray heads nodding as they described how the spring had served both settlers and native families for decades before the railroad's arrival. Their words carried the weight of frontier memory, each detail adding strength to Judy's claim. Nayland rose next, her quiet dignity commanding attention. "The waters of this spring have sustained my people through many seasons," she said, gesturing to the treaty document Pastor Whitcomb held. "Our rights to access these waters were promised in writing. Just as Judy's mother's deed promises her guardianship of the land, the 5 council members leaned close together, their whispered debate growing heated. Councilman Peters, the banker, argued for the railroad's interests, while old Judge Morrison thumped his cane, defending property rights with fierce conviction. The crowd's murmuring grew louder as the deliberation stretched on. Some folks who had witnessed the morning's violence at the spring shared their accounts, painting a damning picture of the railroad men's brutality. Suddenly, the back door burst open. Judy's father stumbled in, still reeking of whiskey from the saloon. "You can't give it to her," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Judy. "She ain't right in the head. Never was. She needs a guardian to manage things proper-like." Dale tensed, ready to move, but Judy slowly rose to her feet. Her voice quavered at first, but grew stronger with each word. "I am no one's property." She lifted her chin, meeting her father's bloodshot glare. "This land is my mother's gift, and I will protect it." A profound silence fell over the hall. Townsfolk who had once mocked Judy's size and timidity now looked at her with new eyes. Several women nodded approvingly, and even some of the miners who had jeered at the auction block weeks ago shifted uncomfortably, shame evident in their downturned faces. Judge Morrison cleared his throat and stood using his cane for support. "This council has heard sufficient evidence." His aged voice carried authority earned through 30 years of frontier justice. "The deed is valid, properly witnessed, and legally binding. Furthermore, we find no grounds for declaring Miss Judy May incompetent. The railroad's claim is hereby denied." Relief swept through Judy like a wave. Her legs buckled, but Dale's strong hands caught her shoulders, holding her steady. Tears spilled down her cheeks as friendly faces suddenly surrounded her. Offering congratulations and support, her father swayed in the doorway, his face twisted with rage and defeat. "You ain't no daughter of mine," he spat. "Don't never expect to see me again." He turned and staggered into the gathering darkness, leaving only the bitter scent of alcohol in his wake. Outside, the evening air bit cold and clean. Stars were beginning to pierce the purple sky as townspeople filed out of the hall. Women who had once crossed the street to avoid Judy now stopped to squeeze her hand or offer warm words. Several men touched their hats respectfully, something like apology in their eyes. Dale stood a few steps away, watching the crowd disperse. He turned to Pastor Whitcomb, who was carefully storing the precious documents in his leather satchel. Their eyes met, and Dale tipped his hat, gratitude evident in the simple gesture. The preacher nodded in return. Understanding all that went unspoken between them, Judy sagged against the hall's wooden railing, exhaustion finally claiming her now that the danger had passed. The night pressed heavy around them, filled with the weight of all that had changed. But the spring was safe, protected by law and community at last. Just as she was protected by the unlikely family she had found, dawn painted the mountain sky in pale gold as Dale's wagon creaked along the forest path. Judy sat between him and Nayland, her shoulders straight despite the weight of yesterday's victory. As they rounded the final bend, the sight of the burned shack made her breath catch. Thin wisps of smoke still rose from blackened timbers, and the roof lay in collapsed heaps of charred wood. Dale's jaw tightened at the destruction. But before he could speak, Judy slid down from the wagon. "We could rebuild it," she said softly, studying the ruins. "Make it stronger than before." Dale turned to her, seeing not the timid girl from the auction block, but a woman with quiet strength. He nodded slowly, respect deepening in his weathered features. They began clearing debris, salvaging what little remained. Dale recovered his old axe head from the ashes, while Judy rescued her mother's hymnal, its edges singed but pages intact. Nayland gathered herbs that had survived in the root cellar, sorting them carefully. The sound of hoofbeats made them pause. To their surprise, a wagon loaded with lumber rolled into the clearing, driven by Pastor Whitcomb himself. Behind him came others women from town carrying baskets of food. Ranchers with tools slung over their shoulders, and young Tommy, the telegraph boy, astride his pony. "Thought you might need some help," the pastor said simply. Climbing down, without waiting for response, the volunteers began unloading supplies by midday. The foundation was marked, and new logs were being stripped. Dale swung his newly hafted axe with renewed vigor, his powerful strokes setting the rhythm for the work. The women set up an outdoor kitchen, where Judy mixed biscuit dough in a borrowed bowl. The scent of fresh-baked biscuits soon drifted across the clearing, drawing hungry workers to the cook fire. Judy served them with quiet pride, accepting their compliments with a shy smile. As the afternoon lengthened, log walls began to rise. She painted protective symbols across the timber with red ochre, murmuring blessings in her native tongue. Several townswomen watched with interest, asking respectful questions about the meaning of each mark. When stars began piercing the darkening sky, a new cabin frame stood solid against the mountain backdrop. Campfires dotted the clearing as workers rested, sharing coffee and stories. Laughter rolled soft through the trees, mixing with the night sounds of the forest. Judy's clear voice rose in a hymn of thanksgiving, the same one she had sung at the spring. Dale bowed his head, and for the first time since losing his family, words of prayer came naturally to his lips. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, loud enough for Judy to hear. For second chances, around them the warmth of community filled the space where ashes had lain, transforming loss into the foundation of something new, a true home, built on belonging. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside the new cabin windows, adding to the deep blanket that already covered the valley. The past weeks had brought transformation to the mountain clearing. Where charred ruins once stood, a sturdy cabin now rose, its fresh-cut timber walls sealed against winter's bite. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, carrying the scent of pine and cooking. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth from the newly built hearth. Judy moved carefully between the wooden counter and the table, setting down 3 steaming bowls of rabbit stew. The cabin was larger than Dale's old shack, with room enough for a proper kitchen and sleeping quarters divided by a curtain. Nayland sat in a chair by the fire, humming one of Judy's favorite hymns while she sorted dried herbs into small cloth pouches. Dale settled into his place at the head of the table, his expression softened by firelight. "Shall we give thanks?" he asked, his voice carrying a gentleness that would have surprised those who once feared him. Judy and Nayland joined him, heads bowed. As he spoke the blessing with steady conviction, through the frosted window, Judy could see the path that led to her spring. Even beneath winter's grip, the water ran clear and strong. Protected now from railroad schemes, her mother's gift had proven more precious than she had ever imagined, not just for the water itself, but for the family it had helped create. Steam rose from her bowl as Judy stirred the stew. Remembering that first day at the livery auction, the cruel laughter, the mockery of her sighs, the shame that had burned so deep. Now those memories seemed to belong to another life entirely. She was still the same size, but she carried herself differently with dignity. With purpose. You're awful quiet tonight, Dale observed, passing her the cornbread. Judy smiled softly. Just thinking about how much has changed. From that day in town to now, she gestured to the warm cabin around them. Sometimes I can hardly believe it. Dale placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. You're stronger than anyone I've known. Girl, showed more courage than those who mocked you ever had. She has the spirit of the mountains in her, Nayland added, her dark eyes warm with affection, and she has found sisters in both our peoples. She reached across the table to squeeze Judy's hand. The spring brings life to all who drink from it, just as your kindness brings warmth to this home. Laughter soon filled the cabin as they shared their meal, trading stories and comfortable silences. The lamplight cast a golden glow through the frosted windows, creating a beacon visible from the valley below. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside, warmth and belonging had taken root. Where once there had been only pain and loneliness, Judy gazed at the flames dancing in the hearth, offering a silent prayer of gratitude. Her mother's final gift had brought her more than land or water rights. It had brought her a family forged in faith and hardship, tempered by love and respect. Here, in this cabin with these people, she had found her true inheritance, a place where dignity and hope could flourish, where the past's wounds could finally heal. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.